So your name? What?
Justin.
Justin, okay. And your buzzer just needs to be firmly in its thing. So yeah, just make sure, not that part. Yeah, just make sure that's firmly in.
Okay.
Go ahead. James? Okay.
Keoni.
Okay.
Suprav, Suprav.
Alright. And over here, go ahead.
Raj, Raj. Joe. Alex. Cole.
Great. You guys ready to start? Yep. Okay. Here's toss-up 1. In a play set in this country, a woman opts to ride through town on a chair carried by 2 men instead of riding in a car. That woman earlier pulled an emergency cord to stop the Flying Dutchman. An author from this country wrote that he does not start out with a thesis but with a story in 21 bullet points he appended to a play in which...
Switzerland.
Yes.
9.
10. Bonus. This word partly titles violin showpieces by Franz Waxman and Pablo de Sarasate based on themes from Carmen. From 10 points each, name this type of piece with no strict form. Julian Fontana prefixed this word to impromptu when publishing a difficult piece after Chopin's death.
Fantasy.
This composer's violin fantasy opens with cembalo-like piano tremolos and includes variations on his lead Sei mir gegrüßt. His Wanderer fantasy and fantasy in F minor for piano duet D940 both have 4 movements. This Czech composer's violin sonata opens with cembalo-like tremolos and includes a ballada. His string quartet number 1 has 4 movements marked con moto, and his string quartet number 2 is based on a Tolstoy story that is itself based on Beethoven's Kreutzer sonata.
No. Check. Sure, that's not right. Smetana.
Janacek.
Yeah, check.
So 20 points.
Okay, sure, he was trying.
Toss-up 2. In a 2000 novel by Joyce Carol Oates, this real-life person is murdered by a government agent called the Sharpshooter.
Abraham Lincoln.
Nope. This woman's affair with Yves Montand is dramatized in the 2004 play Finishing the Picture. The character who represents this real-life person downs most of a bottle of pills and a bottle of whiskey in the second act of a play in which her lover, Quentin, calls an ambulance to take her away. This person is represented by Maggie in a play whose set includes a concentration camp tower. The actress portrayed Rosalind Tabor in a movie written by her husband, The Misfits, and her suicide inspired many of the interpersonal seeds in the play After the Fall. For 10 points, name this actress once married to Arthur Miller. Yes. Bonus. Some time-dependent problems can be solved using the Dyson series in this technique. For 10 points each, name this technique which is used to study complicated quantum systems by adding a small disturbance to an exactly solvable problem.
Perturbation.
Yes. In perturbation theory, the first-order correction to the energy is found by calculating one of these quantities between an unperturbed wave function and the perturbing Hamiltonian. Fermi's golden rule for determining the transition state between 2 eigenstates requires the calculation of one of these quantities. Answer. Matrix elements. Perturbation theory is useful because it is often impossible to solve this equation exactly for complicated potentials. The time-independent form of this equation states that the Hamiltonian acting on a wave function equals an energy eigenvalue times that wave function. Yes, that's 20. Toss-up 3. While visiting this location, Roger Pryor assumed a bottle of iodide was actually whiskey and almost died after he consumed it. An object taken from this location inspired the Frederick Church painting Our Banner in the Sky. Daniel Ho and Edward Galloway died here in an explosion sparked during a 100-gun salute and were the only casualties of the losing side. Abner Doubleday called himself the hero of this location for...
Gettysburg?
Nope. For firing the first return shot, which completely missed. The ship, Star of the West, was unable to resupply Major Robert Anderson's force at this location, which was surrendered after a PG-2 Beauregard opened fire in April 1861. For 10 points, name this fort in Charleston, South Carolina, which was fired upon in the opening moments of the Civil War.
Fort Sumter?
Yes, that's right.
Oh, he's
Just,
Yeah.
it is fine, but like just in general.
Alright, your bonus. Several historians insist that a more accurate name for this conflict is the Southwestern War. For 10 points each, name this conflict that featured such engagements as the Siege of Kumamoto Castle. This war ended with the Battle of Shiroyama and the death of people like Saigo Takamori.
Is it Boshin or is it the no,
Answer?
Boshin War?
Satsuma Rebellion. The Satsuma Rebellion opposed this Japanese emperor, who had taken power in a namesake restoration in 1868.
Meiji?
In the 16th and 19th centuries, foreigners arrived in Japan in vessels known by this two-word phrase, referring to their appearance, and in the latter case, the smoke from their steam engines.
Black ships.
Wait, it's cool.
I
That's
think
okay.
two
Go
words,
for
black
that.
ships.
Answer? Yes, either one is fine.
Oh, either one is fine.
Yeah.
Okay.
So 20 points there.
That's the Japanese word.
Yep. Toss up 4. This character enjoys a dream in which he gets out of bed and goes through the door into an identical bedroom, and so on to infinity. This man's death coincides with the unexpected return of the brother of an exiled Indian princess who declares, "I have come for the exequies of the king." He is haunted by the ghost of a man he easily kills with a spear throw in a cockfighting pit. This character spends the last years of his life tied to a chestnut tree by his house after he goes mad and starts speaking Latin. This man is the husband of Ursula Iguaran, and his sons include the rebel Colonel Aureliano. For 10 points, name this character from 100 Years of Solitude, the patriarch of the Buendia family.
Like Urbana Zubarino?
Nope.
Urbino?
Jose Arcadio Buendia.
That's bad.
So, toss up 5. In one story, this man's body is rejected by the Rhone River and thus ends up near Lake Lucerne. In that story, the emperor kills this man after being healed by the handkerchief of Veronica. This man defends a choice of an inscription with the phrase, quod scripsi, scripsi. After hearing that everyone on the side of truth listens to another person, this man asks the infamous question, what is truth? His wife warns him she has suffered in a dream because of an innocent man. An angry crowd tells this man they have no king but Caesar, and demands that...
Like Pontius Pilate?
Yes. Bonus. Like John Belushi, this musician had a vastly inferior brother, but unlike Jim Belushi, this man's brother, Linus, was beaten to death by Heracles for being too harsh of a liar teacher. For 10 points each, name this legendary musician, best known for nearly succeeding in retrieving his beloved Eurydice from the underworld after she died of a snake bite. After an understandably depressed Orpheus spurned the love of Thracian Maenads, not to mention all other women, the enraged Maenads left him in this state.
Wait, decapitated, ripped apart.
Yeah, right. Like ripped apart.
Prompts?
Decapitated?
Sure.
Decapitated?
Yes.
Okay.
Orpheus was also considered the founder of a namesake religious tradition preserved in rare texts like the Derveni Papyrus. Notable divergences from mainstream mythology include the world's creation from a cosmic egg that hatched into this primordial being.
Is this Aharonasta? That's like weird.
Answer,
Aharonasta.
Thanes.
Okay. Yeah.
20. Okay.
Yeah. Because like Aharonasta probably should. But like everything does. Like what's it? It's like the Western religion with eggs.
Just because of watching something.
I forgot who the main character is.
We should.
Yeah,
That's something that I should know. Oh well.
There's just so many characters in that book, you know.
I mean, most of them have the same.
Yes, it's true. It's the one with the other name.
Yeah.
Alright, are you guys good? Everything okay? Alright, here's toss-up 6. In an opera by this man, Zima and Adario pledged their love for each other before a peace pipe ceremony. That opera by this man also contains the act The Generous Turk. He cut a prologue that celebrated the War of the Polish Succession from the revival of an opera in which Tellyra sings Triste après and is loved by a pair of twins, only one of whom is initially immortal. This man's operas were disparaged by fans of Pergolesi's La Serva Padrona in The War of the Buffoons. He wrote one of the first explanations of tonal music in his treatise on harmony.
Remote.
Yes. And here's your bonus. Identify the following about natural language processing. Natural language processing is a technique that is often used in this field, wherein machines attempt to emulate human cognitive processes. John Searle contrasted the strong form of this field with the weak form in which computers only simulate thought.
Yeah, AI.
A classifier to automatically determine the category of a quizzable question might perform this operation on its text as part of a pre-processing step. Martin Porter developed an algorithm for this task, the removal of inflections from words, which is less complex than lemmatization because it ignores parts of speech. Answer.
Semantics.
Stemming. A common NLP problem is to identify topics in a corpus of text. One way to do that is through clustering, which is this general kind of machine learning algorithm that is able to make inferences from unlabeled data.
No answer.
Unsupervised machine learning.
Okay.
10 on the bonus.
Clear.
Yep. Toss-up 7. This poet gave special thanks to a playwright from first youth tested up to extreme old age who saw life steadily and saw it whole in a sonnet to a friend. The speaker hears a whisper asking, "What dost thou in this living tomb?" In his poem that describes wandering between two worlds, one dead, the other powerless, to be born. This poet of stanzas from the Grande Chartreuse lamented this strange disease of modern life in a poem named for a man who joins a wild brotherhood upon leaving Oxford. He also described the melancholy long withdrawing...
Arnold.
Yes.
Yeah. Scholarship seat. Yeah. Arnold.
Bonus. A Bonwit Teller storefront window display about this character ended with its artist crashing through the window in a bathtub. For 10 points each, name this mythological character. In a surrealist painting, his posture is copied by a hand reaching out to an egg from which a flower is growing.
Yeah. Narcissus.
What?
Narcissus.
Yes. That painting, Metamorphosis of Narcissus, is by this artist who included several melting timepieces in The Persistence of Memory.
Dali.
This author of the Surrealist Manifesto criticized Dali for portraying Adolf Hitler and coined the name Avida Dollars, an anagram of Dali's name, to make fun of Dali's growing commercialism.
Baton.
For 30. And now we're tied. Toss-up 8. This thinker's son wrote a study in the sociology of deviance titled Wayward Puritans. A book by this non-anthropologist contrasts legends of Hitler with those of Maxim Gorky and contains fieldwork observations of the Sioux and Yurok peoples. This author analyzed the man who shouts, "I am not," during choir practice, and then undergoes a good son versus good monk crisis. This man argued that an infant must contend with the conflict between hope and basic trust versus basic mistrust, and that every stage in life features a similar conflict.
Erickson?
Yeah. Bonus. This poem opens with a declaration, "I caught this morning's minion," referring to the title creature. For 10 points each, name this Gerard Manley Hopkins poem, a sonnet about a dapple dawn-drawn falcon that rung upon the rein of a wimpling wing.
It might be.
That's his
Okay, just say it, yeah.
Answer.
Pied Beauty.
The Windhover. The phrase dapple dawn-drawn is an example of this type of literary device, in which the first letter in a series of multiple words is repeated.
Alliteration.
Yep. Hopkins' poetry was influenced by his belief in this concept, the distinctive design that constitutes individual identity. Humans recognize this concept in others through the act of instress. Answer. Inscape. 20. 9. Dreads are designer forms of these proteins that only respond to synthetic small molecules. Thrombin cleaves the N-terminus off of a protease-activated type of these proteins to reveal a tethered ligand, which then binds to itself. VIP and calcitonin act via members of the secretin family of these proteins. Sodium ion channels close, releasing inhibition of bipolar cells after isomerization of 11-cis-retinal to all-trans-retinal causes a conformational change in one of these proteins called rhodopsin. They induce an intracellular GTPase to dissociate into alpha and beta gamma subunits, leading to activation of adenylate cyclase and
A G protein.
prompt.
A G protein, a couple protein.
Nope. And CMP signaling. For 10 points, name the 7 transmembrane domain receptors linked to namesake proteins. Time. G protein coupled receptors.
Right.
Toss-up 10. A group with this name can be represented by SPECT modules or by Young tableau with n boxes and n distinct entries. Every group is isomorphic to a subset of of a group with this name.
Permutation.
Prompt.
Symmetric.
Yes.
Permutation groups are called symmetric groups.
Yep. And here's your bonus. Vicinal diols react with this anion to form two carbonyl compounds for 10 points each. Name this anion, which accomplishes that oxidative cleavage with a mechanism similar to lead-4 acetate.
So, yeah.
Answer?
Phosphonium ylide.
Periodate, or periodic acid. Vicinal diols can be synthesized asymmetrically by bis-hydroxylation of double bonds with osmium tetroxide in the presence of a chiral quinine catalyst in a reaction named for this man. This man won the Nobel in Chemistry in 2011 and is widely regarded as one of the pioneers of click chemistry. Carl Berry Sharpless. Alkenes can be directly cleaved into two carbonyl compounds by reacting them with this light blue gas, an allotrope of oxygen present in the upper atmosphere.
Ozone, right? Yeah.
Answer. Yeah. That's 10. At halftime, the score is 140-90.
30 to 75.
Yes.
There's
Negs.
there's 3 nags over there, and then you said 20 on bonus 8, but it was actually 10.
All right, let's do that first. 8 was... Right, it was only 10 because it was alliteration.
Yeah.
And I forgot to write down all the negs.
All of them.
Yes. I don't know why. Just happens like that sometimes.
It's a lot of day.
So on 9, there was a neg on this side, right?
I think they were.
It was the receptor for
They were just a weirdly specific.
probably a
Yeah.
Was there a neg on 4 also that I missed?
2, 3, and 9.
2, 3, and 9?
4 was just dead.
Just dead, okay. So who negged 2 and 3? 2 was Monroe. Joe 2, okay. Cole 3. Thank you. So with that, it's 70, right?
75.
75, yeah, that's right. 75. And 140, is that wrong also? Oh, it's 130? Because I made that wrong. So 130 to 75.
Yes.
Okay, there we go. Thank you. Alright, here is toss of 11. This piece does not write out the parts for side drums, instead instructing an unspecified number of them to play ad libitum. A traffic jam was caused by a rehearsal of this piece at Vauxhall Gardens that attracted 12,000 paying customers. For a performance at the Foundling Hospital a month after its premiere, this work's composer added strings. Its third movement is a largo alla siciliana titled La Paix, which is followed by La Re.
So, fireworks music, music for the Royal Fireworks.
Sure.
Can you follow up on the first thing you said?
Let me look it up.
You can just mark it and look it up later.
Yeah, with fine arts, it's a little bit more acceptable that.
Well, usually it's like you have to
It's
get
a
the
title.
words.
Yeah.
We'll figure it out.
I mean,
the right
we'll
way.
figure it out.
If you just mark it and we'll figure it out if it matters, I think.
Okay. For now, I'm going to give you that.
Okay.
And here's your bonus. This concept is related to the is-ought problem presented by Hume, and it is illustrated using the indefinability of the color yellow. For 10 points each, give this error described in a 1903 book that arises from trying to define good via properties like pleasant or desirable.
Missing shade of blue.
Naturalistic fallacy. The naturalistic fallacy was defined in this influential work of moral philosophy by G.E. Moore, which also argues against ethical naturalism with the open question argument.
Isn't it like Sense and Sensibility? Ethics.
Answer?
Ethics.
Principia Ethica.
Yeah.
G.E. Moore analyzed the sentence, "Here is a hand," in the defense of this concept. Thomas Reed founded a philosophical school named for this basic ability, which titles it Thomas Paine's best-known pamphlet.
Common sense. Common sense.
Yeah, that's 10. Okay, here's 12. A hero of this conflict rode a horse whose name translates as stupid because that was his godfather's reaction to the animal.
like Reconquista.
Yes.
ACF National Guard.
And here's your bonus. This term was coined by the then French Minister of Finance, Valéry Giscard d'Estaing, for 10 points each. Give this two-word English phrase that refers to the supposed advantage that the U.S. has due to its own currency, the dollar, being the international reserve currency. Answer? Exorbitant privilege. The phrase is frequently attributed to this president of France at the time, a former World War II hero who led France for almost all of the 1960s.
Yeah, de Gaulle.
When Giscard d'Estaing became president himself, he backed the project to create the TGV, which is one of these things. The TGV has expanded its network and enjoyed massive commercial success.
Train.
Yes. 20 points. Toss-up 13. A band album in this country has a title translated as Keep the Gate Closed, Little Brother, and was by folk singer Karel Kryl. While visiting this country as a representative of multiple sclerosis charity, Shirley Temple saw a woman gunned down in the street, a fact that she remembered when she served as U.S. ambassador to here in 1989. A leader of this country announced an action program 20 years after the victorious February coup put communists...
Czechoslovakia?
Yes. All right. Bonus. In a play, Bully Worthen insists that his mother hire someone to perform this service, for 10 points each. Name the service that is provided for the elderly Miss Daisy by the Black Hoke Colburn in an Alfred Urey play.
Yeah.
Driving
Miss Daisy is the first part of a trilogy of Urey plays all set in this city. The other parts of the trilogy include Parade and a play about a 1939 movie premiere, The Last Night of Ballyhoo.
Atlanta, maybe. Atlanta.
Yes, this Clifford Odets play is also about driving, as it ends with a group of taxicab drivers calling for a strike over the objections of the union leader, Harry Fatt.
That sounds like it. Okay, yeah.
On the waterfront?
Waiting for Lefty.
Oh, right.
20. Toss-up 14. The mineral boltwoodite is named after the pioneer of this process who first published it in 1907. Shrimp is an Australian sector instrument used for this technique. Samarium and neodymium were used in this technique to support the chondritic uniform reservoir model. Zircon and monazite are used in one variation of this technique, which relies on the closure of temperature of a mineral. This method was famously used on the Akasta gneiss and Nuvuagituk greenstone belt. Dendrochronology is one method of this technique, and one element used in this technique is only viable for about 60,000 years.
So like dating radioactive
Sure.
things.
Yeah, dating is fine. Okay. Here is your bonus. Conservation in the presence of this phenomenon was the subject of the Sloss debate. For 10 points each, name this phenomenon in which an ecosystem becomes discontinuous, resulting in reduced patch size and consequently increased edge effects. It is a major driver of biodiversity loss.
Yeah.
It's like,
Answer,
Okay. Fracturing.
I have fragmentation. Jared Diamond's position in the Sloss debate extrapolated the theory on the biogeography of these places put forth in a book by MacArthur and Wilson. The Florida Keys are
Islands.
Yeah. Habitat suitability can be predicted with this binary observational sampling method. A namesake matrix of zeros and ones, with rows for species and columns for sites, contains data from this method, which can be used to analyze species co-occurrence.
What's the one where you put like a grid on the ground and count stuff?
I don't know what it's called.
Answer?
Gridding.
Presence absence sampling. 10 on that.
Only checking if it's there. Not
Yeah.
Toss-up 15. In one culture's mythology, the goddess of storage and wealth generally takes the form of an invisible type of this creature with ears and is the only gashin or household deity that appears as an animal. That goddess, Upshin, is believed to bring wealth, which is why weasels and these creatures were once welcomed into the homes of Koreans. After being bitten by an ant, one of these creatures from another culture's mythos regurgitated the Wawalog sisters to form a landmass. The waggle is one of these animals popular among Dreamtime stories. A rainbow one of these animals...
serpent?
Yes. This party was the first one that future Republican Thaddeus Stevens was involved in, for 10 points each. Named this third party that nominated William Wirt for the presidency in 1832. It was one of the first parties to use nominating conventions and party platforms in American history.
Anti-Masonic.
The anti-Masonic movement took off after this man, a former Freemason, disappeared in upstate New York after turning against the Masons. Conspiracy theorists said he was murdered.
That's criminal. Alright, Lewis.
William Morgan. Many anti-Masons moved to this party, which, under such leaders as Henry Clay, opposed the Democrats throughout much of the 1840s and 1850s.
Right.
seems later than
Answer?
Wig.
Yes, that is 20.
They were. It was pretty much totally different.
Toss up 16. It's not Georgia, but a festival with the slogan "Give Peach a Chance" is held in this state's city of Ruston. This state's central city of Natchitoches is known for producing meat pies. This state's residents make dishes from its invasive population of the nutria rodent, which was introduced by the McIlhenny.
Louisiana?
Yes.
Louisiana.
This poet exclaimed, "That taste of opiate wine, lure of the dark valley," in an elegy for her son. Each named this poet of Requiem, an elegy written over the course of 3 decades.
Akhmatova.
Akhmatova, whose first husband was killed by the secret police, wrote in this language.
Russian.
An Akhmatova poem is titled for being a poem without one of these figures. In a Mikhail Lermontov novel, Pechorin is the title one of these figures.
Hero.
Yeah.
Hero.
For 30. A man who gained fame for this activity likely modeled for a bronze sculpture exhibited by Arthur Lee at the Armory Show titled The Ethiopian. A massive mural in the Smithsonian depicting this activity by James Montgomery Flagg was first created for a restaurant owned by one of the men in the painting. A participant in this activity is about to fall onto 2 men looking worriedly upwards in a painting partially titled for Luis Angel Firpo. A trick to skirt the Lewis Law of 1900 explains the title of one painting of this activity, both members of this club. A man smoking...
Boxing?
Yes.
Oh.
Bonus. Answer the following about songs in the Great American Songbook. Harold Arlen and Johnny Mercer wrote a 1941 song titled for This Thing in the Night. The famous opening of the song begins, "My Mama Done Told Me."
Okay, sure. That's a thing that happens.
Answer. Blues in the Night. The song "I Got Rhythm" was written by 2 brothers, George and Ira, from this family. George also composed the song "Summertime" for his opera Porgy and Bess.
Gershwin.
The songs "I've Got You Under My Skin" and "Night and Day" were written by this man, who was severely injured in the 1937 horse riding accident. Ella Fitzgerald released an album of her singing his songbook in 1956.
Maybe Current.
That's the name.
It's a person.
Answer.
Current.
Cole Porter.
Oh, that was my other guess.
10.
The person who wrote all of this.
It was either Porter or Current.
Toss up 18. Generation of these phenomena are thermodynamically favorable at the critical temperature of the Kosterlitz-Thouless transition in the XY model. An exact solution to the Navier-Stokes equations named for Lamb and Oseen describes the decay of one of these phenomena due to viscosity. When a fluid flows on either side of some body and is separated, then it can form a street of these phenomena named for von Karman. Helmholtz names 3 theorems concerning these phenomena, the first of which states...
Vortex?
Yes.
It makes sense.
Bonus. Name these contemporary authors who have something in common for 10 points each. This author of thrillers aroused conspiracy theorists with such books as The Da Vinci Code and Angels and Demons, both of which were made into movies featuring Tom Hanks.
Brown.
Yep. This author wrote about Oscar's quest to identify the story behind a key that he finds in a vase after his father is killed in the September 11th attacks in Extremely Loud and Incredibly Close. Hey, that was made into a movie featuring Tom Hanks too.
Yeah, I don't remember.
Answer. Jonathan Safran Foer. This author wrote a memoir about caring for his younger brother Toph after his parents died of cancer. A novel by this man is about a new employee at a powerful tech company and was presumably made into a film starring Tom Hanks as well.
Oh, this is it.
It sounds like it could be Michael Lewis, but I don't think it is.
Answer. Dave Eggers.
Okay.
Oh, is that
10.
memoir? What's it called?
19. John B. Cobb wrote an introduction to theological approaches based on the metaphysics of this philosopher, whose ideas were also extended to theology by Charles Hartshorne. This philosopher eschewed the view of reality as being composed of permanent substances in favor of elemental drops of experience that he called actual occasions, part of a metaphysical system that he called the philosophy of organism. With a former student, this author of Process and Reality co-wrote a 3-volume book that relies on the axiom of reducibility in its attempt to demonstrate that all mathematical truths can be translated into terms from formal logic.
Whitehead?
Yeah.
It was Russell Whitehead.
Yeah.
I remember it's I think the class of the ICT PC, because that's something.
Alright, bonus. This council lasted for almost 4 years and was strongly influenced by King Sigismund for 10 points each. In this council, begun in 1414, that both ended the Western Schism and condemned Jan Hus, who would be executed soon afterwards. Yes. Hus was executed in this manner, which was also how many Jews were killed in the Strasbourg massacre, and how Joan of Arc was executed in 1431.
Burn at the stake.
The Council of Constance elected this man as Pope, which more or less ended the conflicting claims of both Pope Gregory XII and anti-Pope Benedict XIII.
Mark John the 15th was an anti-pope.
Yeah, you're right.
So maybe John the 16th.
Answer.
John the 16th.
Martin V.
Okay, sure.
20 points on that.
That's anti-pope annihilation.
And last toss-up. During this period, a man's marriage to a woman known as the Witch horrified the populace because she did not convert from Catholicism. While it did not take place in South America, a horrific famine during this period was probably caused...
The trouble?
What?
The trouble?
Yes. Your bonus. In an oligopoly, there are few sellers who dominate a given market for 10 points each. In an oligopoly, firms are able to set these levels rather than having to take them as given if there were perfect competition. These levels are displayed on the opposite axis as quantity in standard economic graphs.
Price, right? Yeah, price.
Yes. The Cournot model of oligopolies was inspired by a spring water market in which this many companies were competing. Most oligopoly theory is introduced by scenarios in which this many firms are competing.
Three seems like
I think
that's
three.
three.
No, 2. The defining feature of Stackelberg competition, unlike in Cournot competition, is that there is a substantial advantage generated for this firm.
Like the largest firm, maybe?
Probably.
The largest firm?
The first mover. 10 on that bonus. I have a score of 330, 135. So the protest is moved. Sorry about that confusion there.